The propane gauge dropped 5% while the HOA clubhouse lights burned across my fence. Their patio heaters hissed on my tank, my private tank, while 40 neighbors stood under glowing string lights pretending it was community warmth. The needle kept falling. The smell of propane drifted through the cold like a warning. I had the shutoff valve, the regulator key, and the only legal service tag on that whole system. Then the clubhouse kitchen burners kicked on. That was the second drop. I watched the pressure graph dive on my phone while Brenda Whitmore raised a champagne glass beside the fire pits. She was smiling under the amber lights, wrapped in a cream wool coat, acting like she had invented winter comfort. Behind her, 3 commercial heaters roared blue and clean. Every one of them was pulling fuel from my side yard. They had not asked. They had not paid. And they had tied into a system they did not understand. My boots crunched over frozen grass as I walked toward the tank. The steel cylinder sat behind my detached garage, half silver, half frost, humming softly through the regulator. I could hear the line working. That low whisper of gas moving through pipe is something most people never notice. I notice it every time. My name is Caleb Turner. I am 44 years old, and I have installed, serviced, and pressure-tested propane systems for 21 years. I do not guess around gas. I do not improvise around flame. And I sure as hell do not let amateurs turn a private fuel system into a neighborhood buffet. The tank was mine. I bought it myself. I poured the pad myself. I paid for the trench, the permits, the inspection, and the remote monitor mounted under the lid. It fed my house, my garage heater, and the small backup generator I kept for ice storms. That was it. At least, that was what the inspection sticker said. A burst of laughter rolled from the clubhouse patio. The sound carried through the dark. Glasses clinked. Music thumped through outdoor speakers. Somebody shouted that the fire pits felt amazing tonight. My phone buzzed again. Another pressure alert. I knelt beside the tank and lifted the lid. Cold metal bit through my gloves. The service valve looked untouched, but the frost pattern was wrong. A thin white line crawled along the outlet fitting, sharper than it should have been. That meant demand. Heavy demand. I followed the buried service line with my flashlight. The beam shook over mulch, gravel, and the bottom of the fence. Near the back corner, fresh soil sat darker than the rest. Somebody had dug there recently. Somebody had tried to pat it flat with a shovel. That little patch of dirt was the first honest thing I saw all night. I scraped it with my boot. Yellow polyethylene pipe flashed under the beam. Not mine. The line ran under the fence, straight toward the clubhouse wall. A cheap coupling sat in the trench, wrapped in tape like a bad secret. No permit tag. No warning marker. No pressure test cap. Just a stolen branch line feeding a party. The air went quiet around me. Then Brenda's voice cut through the fence. Isn't this better than everyone using ugly little tanks? I stood there with my flashlight on the pipe, listening to my fuel burn through her sentence. The generator light blinked behind me. One ice storm, one hard freeze, and that missing propane would not be a bill anymore. It would be heat, safety, and power disappearing from my house. This was not a neighbor borrowing a cup of sugar. This was a system they had already built around theft. And the next sound came from under the ground. I crouched beside the trench and pressed 2 fingers against the branch line. Warm, not hot. Just enough flow to tell me this had not been hooked up tonight. This had been running for days, maybe weeks. I shut off my flashlight and let my eyes adjust. Music drifted over the fence. Somebody laughed hard enough to cough. The heaters kept hissing. The line beneath my hand vibrated once every few seconds with pressure demand. Tiny pulses. Rhythmic. Comfortable. Like everyone on the other side thought this arrangement was normal. I stood up and walked along the fence until I found the gate. It was propped open with a decorative rock. No emergency. No construction signs. Just neighbors carrying trays of food into the clubhouse while my fuel disappeared underground. Nobody looked guilty. That bothered me more than if they had. Inside, the clubhouse looked like a holiday catalog exploded. Fire bowls burned at every table. Outdoor heaters lined the patio. The kitchen windows glowed warm yellow. People in winter jackets stood around talking about how much nicer community events had become lately. Brenda saw me almost immediately. She smiled the way people do when they think they already won. "Caleb," she called. "Come enjoy the upgrades." Upgrades? I looked past her shoulder. A portable heater sat against the wall. Commercial grade. 50,000 BTU. Another one stood near the patio entrance. Then another. Somebody had gone all in. I asked one question. Who installed the gas supply? Her smile stayed exactly the same. That told me more than her answer. She waved one hand. Community Improvement Committee handled it. Committee. People love that word. Makes responsibility disappear. I looked down near the foundation. Fresh conduit clips. New mounting screws. Somebody had spent money here. Somebody expected this setup to stay. Brenda stepped closer and lowered her voice. Her perfume mixed with smoke and propane exhaust. Honestly, Caleb, you barely use that system. The community gets more value this way. I just looked at her. She took my silence as agreement and kept talking. We figured neighbors help neighbors. Figured. Not asked. Not leased. Not metered. Around us, people clinked glasses and leaned toward the heaters. One older couple thanked Brenda for making winter events possible again. She soaked it in. Then she said the part she should not have said. The board approved permanent expansion next quarter. Permanent. I looked at the heaters again. Then at the line disappearing under the clubhouse. Then at the fuel graph on my phone. I zoomed out. 30 days. The pattern hit all at once. Weekend spikes. Event nights. Consistent overnight draw. They had not borrowed fuel. They had built dependency. My garage generator suddenly felt a lot smaller in my head. Not because of capacity. Because somebody else had already started counting on it. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and took one last look at the patio flames. They burned steady. Too steady. That meant there was more connected than I had found. I left the clubhouse without another word. Cold air hit harder once the heater noise disappeared. My boots scraped over frozen gravel while the fuel graph stayed open on my phone. The line was still drawing. Slow. Constant. Comfortable. Whoever designed this expected me to keep paying and never notice. I walked back to my tank and sat on the concrete pad beside it. The steel gave off that faint metallic smell mixed with cold vapor. I listened. Regulators tell stories if you know what to hear. Small clicks. Pressure corrections. Tiny adjustments. This one sounded busy. Too busy for one house and a garage. I opened the monitoring dashboard and pulled historical data. 30 days became 90. 90 became 6 months. The screen filled with clean, repeating patterns. Fridays. Saturdays. Event nights. Demand spikes every time the clubhouse calendar showed social gatherings. Summer barbecue nights. Fall football watch parties. Holiday decorating kickoff. Somebody had turned my fuel supply into an unofficial utility. Then I checked something else. Tank refill records. My supplier logs every delivery. Same truck. Same driver. Same route. But the refill intervals had changed. Last year I filled every 10 weeks. This year, 5. Then 4. Then 3. I stared at the dates and suddenly remembered little things I had ignored. Extra clubhouse lights. More evening events. Brenda sending neighborhood emails bragging about improved resident experience. Community warmth. Premium amenities. Those words landed differently now. I opened the HOA community page. Photos everywhere. Smiling neighbors around outdoor flames. Heated cider station. Winter patio expansion. One picture stopped me. I zoomed in. In the corner behind a stack of folding chairs sat a heater with a handwritten label taped to it. Auxiliary line. My stomach tightened just enough to notice. Auxiliary meant primary. That meant there was another supply point somewhere. I drove around the clubhouse perimeter. Slow. No headlights. Just parking lights and cold windshield fog. On the back side of the building, I found utility enclosures. Electric. Water. Communications. Then a locked service panel with fresh paint around the screws. I stepped closer. There it was. Yellow warning tape inside the vent gap. Propane. The clubhouse never had propane before. I knew because I serviced half the neighborhood and installed 3 systems myself over the years. Nobody had called me. Nobody had pulled a permit through local contractors. Which meant somebody wanted this quiet. I took photos. Close. Wide. Couplings. Pipe depth. Service points. Nothing dramatic. Just facts. Then I noticed something else taped beside the service door. Event Schedule Expansion Committee. Chairperson, Brenda Whitmore. Estimated winter capacity increase, 75 residents. 75. My tank was not sized for that. Not even close. Suddenly this stopped being about fuel bills or entitlement. If enough demand stacked at once, pressure drop would hit everything connected. My house. My generator. Their heaters. All at the same time. And they were planning to add more. I looked back toward the glowing clubhouse windows and realized nobody over there had any idea what they were depending on. The next morning, I did not touch the valve. That surprised me more than anything. Frost still clung to the tank lid while the monitor showed overnight draw continuing exactly on schedule. Somebody had used fuel from midnight to 6 in the morning. No parties, no events, just steady consumption. I poured coffee and opened the clubhouse calendar again. Community yoga, morning coffee social, senior walking club, heated patio available daily. Available. That word sat wrong in my mouth. I drove to my supplier instead of work. The office smelled like cardboard, diesel, and burnt coffee. Gary was behind the counter wearing the same faded jacket he had owned for 10 winters. He looked at my account and frowned before I even said anything. "You running a greenhouse now?" I asked him to print delivery history. He handed me 6 pages and leaned closer. "Your usage doubled this season." I folded the pages and left. No speech. No drama. Facts first. Back home I spread everything across my garage workbench. Delivery dates. Monitoring logs. Community event schedule. Heater estimates. Fuel draw calculations. I started matching them. Line by line. Event by event. The pattern locked together cleaner than I wanted. Bigger event. Bigger refill. Long weekend. Early refill. Winter kickoff party. Emergency top-off delivery 48 hours later. My garage heater clicked on overhead. Warm air pushed sawdust smell across the room. I looked at my backup generator in the corner. Gray housing. Quiet. Reliable. The whole reason I installed propane in the first place. Ice storms hit this county every few years. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to knock power out and remind people what heat is worth. Then another detail hit me. My generator had started its weekly self-test late twice this month. Not failed. Delayed. Pressure lag. I pulled maintenance logs. There it was. Minor supply fluctuations. Small enough to ignore. Until now. Somebody else had already started competing with systems inside my own property. Around noon my phone lit up. Neighborhood email. From Brenda. Subject line, winter expansion success. She thanked residents for supporting upgraded amenities and announced new outdoor seating and additional heating installations before Christmas. Additional. I opened the attached rendering. More fire features. More patio zones. More enclosed space. Then I saw it. Bottom corner. Tiny text. Utility infrastructure phase completed. Completed. Not proposed. Not approved. Completed. I walked outside and looked toward the clubhouse roofline. Steam drifted upward in white ribbons. Cars filled the lot in daylight. People carried folding chairs inside. Nobody looked nervous. Nobody looked temporary. They were already planning around fuel they did not control. That afternoon, a contractor truck rolled into the clubhouse lot. No markings. Just ladders and pipe racks. 2 guys unloaded another boxed heater. One of them pointed toward my side of the property while talking. Then both of them nodded. I stayed in my driveway and watched until they disappeared inside. I finally understood what bothered me most. Nobody had asked because nobody planned to stop. I waited 3 days. Not because I was unsure. Because patterns get louder when nobody interrupts them. Every morning before work, I checked the monitor. Every evening, I checked it again. Draw curves. Pressure recovery. Consumption windows. The numbers stopped looking like fuel and started looking like behavior. Tuesday nights stayed low. Friday climbed. Saturday jumped. Sunday brunch pulled more than my garage heater did during a freeze warning. They had routines now. Habits. Dependence. On the 4th day, my refill truck arrived again. Too early. The diesel engine echoed down the street, and half the neighborhood did not even look up. That hit harder than it should have. The driver stepped out and glanced at the gauge. "You burning through this stuff for a side business?" Same joke as before. Different tone. I smiled and said no. He started connecting the hose. Then he stopped and looked toward the clubhouse. He narrowed his eyes for half a second. "Those new patio heaters over their propane?" I shrugged. He shrugged back. Neither of us said anything else. Some questions are too expensive to ask out loud. That afternoon, I did something I had not done in years. I pulled the original service binder from a cabinet in my garage. Not permits. Not legal papers. Just equipment records. Serial numbers. Installation photos. Maintenance intervals. I flipped through until I found the regulator model and pressure specs. Then I opened manufacturer guidelines. Continuous load assumptions. Recovery times. Recommended safety margins. My eyes stopped on one line. Shared commercial demand requires dedicated metering and isolation. Isolation. I closed the binder. The garage suddenly felt smaller. I walked outside. Cold air. Pine smell. Clubhouse lights already on. Through the trees, I could see another heater had been added near the side patio. The glow stretched farther now, like they were expanding territory without realizing it. My phone buzzed. Community email again. Brenda. Reminder. Holiday market this Saturday. Expected attendance 80 plus. Extended evening hours. Outdoor comfort improvements completed. 80 plus. I opened my monitoring app automatically. Then I laughed once under my breath. Not because it was funny, because she had just sent me a demand forecast. I made coffee and sat in the garage with the monitor open and the event announcement beside it. 80 people. Outdoor heating. Kitchen demand. Winter temperature. My tank. My generator. Same supply. Same line. Same regulator. I started writing numbers on cardboard with a marker. Consumption estimates. Duration windows. Pressure thresholds. I kept adjusting until one column finally stayed red. Not failure. Not danger. Just shortage. Not enough for everything at once. That changed something. Up until then, I thought they were stealing. Now I realized they were planning. And plans mean expectations. Expectations mean schedules. Schedules mean one thing. Timing matters. I stood up, looked at the tank through the garage window, and for the first time all week I stopped thinking about stopping them and started thinking about when. Saturday morning arrived bright and cold. The kind of winter day that tricks people into staying outside longer than they should. By 8 o'clock, the clubhouse parking lot already had rows of SUVs and folding signs pointing toward the holiday market. I stayed home. Coffee. Monitor. Notebook. No speeches. No confrontation. The tank outside sat full from the latest delivery. Silver surface catching pale sunlight. Everything looked normal. That was the point. Around noon, the graph started climbing. Exactly on schedule. Small draw at first. Kitchen prep. Then heaters. Then another jump. The line rose in clean steps like someone opening valves one by one. I watched pressure recovery tighten. Not fail. Just work harder. By 1:30, I could hear faint music through the trees. Somebody had hired live performers. Cars kept arriving. My phone buzzed with neighborhood posts. Families smiling around outdoor fire features. Comments about how amazing the upgrades were. Brenda appeared in every third photo wearing that same cream coat and holding a clipboard like she personally invented winter. I zoomed in on one picture. More heaters. Not one extra. 3. They had actually expanded. I set my coffee down and walked to the tank. The regulator gave off a soft ticking sound now. Small corrections. Frequent. I rested one hand on the steel. Cold outside. Working hard inside. I opened the lid and looked at the service valve. Same position. Same setup. But not for long. Back in the garage, I laid everything out. New lock. Tamper seal. Service tag. Pressure logger. Nothing dramatic. Just equipment people use every day. I worked slowly. No anger. No speeches in my head. Tighten. Check. Document. Install. The smell of machine oil and cold metal filled the garage. Every click sounded louder than normal. Halfway through, I stopped and looked toward the clubhouse. Music. Laughter. Heat drifting into winter air. Nobody knew anything was changing. That mattered. I finished installing the lock housing and tested it twice. Open. Close. Open. Close. Clean movement. Then I attached the logger and synced it to my phone. Real time. Every demand change. Every recovery cycle. Every interruption. I put fresh tamper tape across the access point and took timestamp photos. Then I sat down and waited. Around 4:15, the graph climbed higher than I had seen all month. Kitchen load. Peak attendance. Patio heaters. The system settled into heavy draw and stayed there. Comfortable. Dependent. That word again. My phone chimed. Another community email. Brenda thanking everyone for record turnout and announcing evening extension until 10:30. Extended hours. I looked at the monitor. Then at the lock. Then back at the clubhouse windows glowing warm through bare trees. They had built a whole experience assuming one thing would never change. At 5:01, I stood up and walked toward the tank. At 5:01, I unlocked the lid and closed the branch supply. Not the main system. Not my house. Not the garage. Just the unauthorized line. One slow turn. Smooth. Mechanical. Final. The regulator clicked once and settled into silence. I locked the housing. Applied the tamper seal. Took a timestamp photo. Then I went back inside and sat at the workbench. The heater above me hummed steady. My coffee was cold. The monitor stayed open beside my notebook. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then the graph changed. Demand dropped hard. Recovery jumped. The line flattened. I watched the numbers stabilize like somebody finally stopped standing on my chest. Outside, winter stayed quiet. Inside the clubhouse, apparently not. My phone started buzzing before I heard anything. Neighborhood group messages. At first it was harmless. Anybody else notice patio heaters shut off? Then another. Kitchen burners acting weird. Then photos. Guests standing with jackets zipped. Fire bowls dark. People moving indoors. Somebody joked that the upgraded system picked a bad night to quit. I kept watching the graph. Small spikes. Sudden drops. Repeated ignition attempts. They were cycling loads now. Looking for capacity that was not there anymore. 10 minutes later, my doorbell rang. Not aggressive. Fast. Confused. I opened the door. 2 neighbors stood outside in scarves and winter hats. Nice people. Retired couple from the next street over. The husband gave a polite smile. Hey Caleb, weird question. You know anything about gas systems? I looked past them toward the clubhouse lights. Half the patio had gone dark. Why? His wife answered. Brenda says maybe neighborhood pressure dropped. Neighborhood pressure. I almost smiled. I kept my face still. Sounds like somebody should check their service setup. They nodded and left. No accusations. No drama. 15 minutes later, another knock. This time Brenda. Same coat. Different face. No champagne. No clipboard. She stood with her arms crossed against the cold. Behind her, the clubhouse looked dimmer than before. We are having utility issues. Utility. Interesting word choice. I stayed in the doorway. She glanced toward my tank before looking back. Tiny movement. Fast. She knew. Could you take a look? She asked. Not apologize. Not explain. Just look. I asked one question. Your system have dedicated supply? Her eyes flickered. 1 second too long. Then she gave a practice smile. There may have been some temporary infrastructure sharing. Sharing. I looked at her. Then at the clubhouse. Then back at her. Temporary things usually stop eventually. She did not answer. Wind moved through the trees. Somewhere behind her, another heater shut off with a soft metallic click. People started carrying blankets outside. Nobody looked angry yet. Just confused. That was the thing about dependence. It feels invisible until the day normal disappears. Brenda adjusted her coat and lowered her voice. This event cannot fail tonight. I looked past her toward the dark patio and realized she had just said the quiet part out loud. Brenda stood on my porch for 3 full seconds before she changed tactics. Her shoulders dropped. Her voice softened. Suddenly, she was not the president anymore. Just a neighbor with a problem. People are cold, she said quietly. I looked past her again. The clubhouse doors opened and closed constantly now. Warm air spilling out in weak bursts. Guests clustered inside instead of outside. The patio looked unfinished without flame. I nodded once. Then whoever designed your heating should fix it. Her jaw tightened. Tiny movement. Gone in a second. This affects everyone. There it was. Not ownership. Not permission. Obligation. She wanted me to step into a system I never agreed to maintain. I kept my hands in my jacket pockets. Does everybody know where their heat comes from? She did not answer. Her eyes moved to the tank again. Then she left. 10 minutes later, the neighborhood app exploded. First confusion. Then questions. Then photos. Someone posted a picture of dark fire bowls with the caption, "Did we lose supply?" Another asked why the clubhouse smelled cold. One resident mentioned seeing contractor trucks all month. Another asked who approved fuel infrastructure upgrades. Then somebody posted the event flyer and circled the line about completed utility expansion. Comments changed immediately. Completed with what budget? When did we vote? Who paid? The tone shifted. Not angry yet. Curious. Curious is dangerous. I opened my laptop and watched without posting. Brenda finally wrote something. Temporary utility interruption. Working with local resources. Local resources. 2 minutes later, somebody replied. Which utility company? No answer. Another resident asked if increased HOA dues funded heating. Then someone uploaded a screenshot from last quarter showing a surprise amenities adjustment. Comments accelerated. I stayed quiet. My monitor sat beside the keyboard, showing normal pressure on my property. Stable. Clean. I made dinner and let the notifications stack. Around 7:30, my doorbell rang again. This time, 3 board members. No Brenda. One of them held printed event papers. Another looked cold and embarrassed. They asked if I knew anything about propane capacity. I invited them into the garage. Warm air. Steel shelves. Tank monitor glowing blue. Nobody spoke for a second. I pointed at the screen. Consumption history. Delivery dates. Recovery graphs. Then I showed them one photo. The branch line under the fence. Nobody touched the table. One board member blinked twice and said, "Wait. This was not community supply." I shook my head. Silence. Real silence. Not awkward. Heavy. The kind where people start replaying old conversations in their heads. One of them looked at the photos again. Brenda said infrastructure was handled. I nodded once. Another looked at the monitor and asked quietly, "How long?" I slid the refill history across the workbench. Nobody said a word after that. They thanked me and left slower than they arrived. I watched their taillights disappear toward the clubhouse. 5 minutes later, every heater in the event photos disappeared from the neighborhood page. The next morning, the neighborhood felt different. Same houses, same trim lawns, same white fences catching cold sunlight. But the clubhouse patio sat empty. No heaters, no glow, no cheerful photos posted overnight. Just folded chairs stacked against the wall and extension cords hanging loose like somebody left in a hurry. I opened my monitor out of habit. Pressure was perfect. Consumption back to normal. My house. My garage. My generator. Nothing else. For the first time in weeks, the graph looked familiar. Around 9:30, another community email arrived. Short. Formal. Emergency board meeting postponed. Winter expansion program under review. No signature from Brenda. Just board administration. 10 minutes later, another message appeared. Residents requesting clarification on infrastructure spending. Somebody had started asking real questions now. I went out to the tank and peeled off the temporary tamper seal. Cold air. Quiet regulator. I left the lock in place. Not because I expected another attempt. Because boundaries work better when people can see them. Around lunch, a truck pulled into the clubhouse lot. Same contractor style. No branding. This time they did not unload equipment. They loaded it. Heater after heater disappeared into the trailer. Nobody looked happy. Nobody argued either. They worked fast and avoided eye contact. A few residents stood nearby with crossed arms watching. No speeches. No drama. Just people realizing something had been built around assumptions that were never true. Later that afternoon, one of the board members stopped by again. Same guy from the garage. He stood at the driveway holding a folder and looking tired. He thanked me for showing the records. Then he said something interesting. Apparently, half the board thought the heating upgrade came from a sponsor program. The other half assumed it was included in existing utilities. Nobody had traced the source. Nobody had checked the details because everything kept working. That part stayed with me. People stop asking questions when comfort shows up on time. He asked if I planned to file anything. I told him no. I already fixed my side. He nodded slowly like that answer surprised him. Before leaving, he glanced toward the tank and said, "Funny thing is, people thought this place got warmer because of community effort." I looked at the steel cylinders sitting in winter sunlight. Sometimes people mistake convenience for ownership. He smiled once and drove away. That evening, I made dinner and sat in the garage while the generator ran its weekly self-test. Right on schedule this time. Clean ignition. Stable pressure. Normal sound. Outside, snow started falling in slow, quiet flakes. Across the fence, the clubhouse lights came on for a while, then shut off early. No event. No crowd. Just darkness and cold doing what they always do when nobody pays for heat. I locked the garage, checked the monitor one last time, and went inside. Nobody knocked after that.